On first down, they hand off to Marlon Mack. Huge hole, 50-yard line. He's at the 40, still going near sideline. He's at the 10. He's at the 5, and he will score. Touchdown, Marlon Mack. Touchdown, INDY. And again, it's picked off. It's Darius Leonard. Leonard with his second INT, and he's streaking down the near sideline. He's at the 40. He's at the 30. He's at the 20. He's going to go. A pick six for the Maniac. Kenny Moore gets to Deshaun Watson. That's a sack for Kenny Moore. Kenny has a pick and now a sack in the game.
Horseshoe is back, baby. The horseshoe is back.
What's going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another edition of the Bring the Juice podcast. I am your host, Cody Felger. Joining me, your other host, Derek Larger. Derek, how you doing, my friend?
Not too bad. Beautiful day out here today. Just another 2 days. By the time we record this, it's 2 more days until the draft. Man, I am super excited. I cannot wait.
Absolutely. And if you guys have been following us, for those of you who are tuning in and you've been listening to our podcast, and especially over this last week, we've been doing a lot of stuff specifically around the NFL draft. And we've been specifically doing these different position groups, looking at them. We started off with the quarterbacks and the running backs. Then we did, I believe it was the wide receivers. Then we did tight end, offensive line. We did defensive line. We did linebacker, safety. And this is the final look at all these position groups. No, we're not going to look at the special teams. Shout out to those people. Zach Hicks, he's probably like, thank you. You're not doing the special teams. He's a guy that I think would eliminate kickers if he had the option. But we're going to look at the cornerback room, not the quarterback, the cornerback on the defensive side. We're going to look at that today. We think there are some potential fits here for the Colts, potentially in the second round, maybe even later. And like we mentioned before every podcast, it's not something where we're going to look at some of those top guys like Jeff Okudah or any of those type of guys. We're going to look at guys that could realistically fall to the Colts there in the second round, pick 34, pick 44, what have you. So we have some guys here we're going to look at that we think could potentially – some of these guys may go in the first round. They may go before the Colts pick. If the Colts trade down, they may go before then. But here are some guys that we're going to look at. Derek, who's your first guy here on your list here that you have for the corner room?
Well, this is a guy that I know Zach will definitely appreciate because he's been talking about this guy a lot recently, and that is Jaylen Johnson, 6 foot, 193 pounds, 31.5-inch arms, 9.5-inch hands, 40 time or around a 4.5, so not too bad there. Projected to be an early second or late second outing. Most don't assume he's going to get to the third round. Most assume he's going to be in that second round somewhere. Johnson, is a very solid zone corner, which again feeds into the system of corners that the Colts are really trying to go with. And when we were breaking down this list, we're kind of looking at guys that were more of zone corners. Some of these guys are not great with zone. But most of these guys, when we're talking about, some of those wild card ones, you want to look at what kind of experience do they have when playing in college, and zone definitely helps because that's the kind of system that the Colts are running right now. And obviously Johnson's a very solid zone corner. He's got good instincts and some ball skills. But he's, again, at 193, that's not too bad, but he is kind of thin, and that people are saying that, his lower body's extremely tight, which is kind of odd to think about when you got a 4.5 40 time and to think he's that tight. But, some are saying that they wonder if he's going to get pushed around a lot when it comes to, bigger bodied wide receivers in the NFL. But in 2019, Johnson had 36 tackles with 11 passes broken up and 2 interceptions. He put up a good game against Washington earlier in that season. So definitely a guy that, has good instincts, 11 passes broken up and 2 interceptions. You can definitely tell this guy definitely is able to make those plays wherever at in coverage. And he actually had a good 2018 season with Utah also. had 4 interceptions, 4 breakups, and 41 tackles. He's got good size, got good ball skills. I think that if the Colts are that desperate for a corner and love Jaylen that much, you could definitely see Johnson going to the Colts in this regard. What do you think about this one, Cody?
Yeah, you mentioned it. The one knock on him will be he's not the longest guy, not the most physically gifted guy in the world in terms of only 6 foot. You mentioned 190 pounds. So some concerns could be he could get boxed out by some bigger receivers. But, talking about just his athleticism, he has incredible speed. He can stay with any wide receiver, presumably, in the draft and in the NFL when he does get drafted. He's a guy that's really good about, staying on the receiver and mirroring him very, very well because he has such good footwork and he also has such good ball skills. He's a guy that is a very physical corner. I mean, for being maybe not the longest guy in the world, he makes up for it in his physicality. He's a guy that I think also is very good at recognizing plays. He's a good play recognition guy. You mentioned it. He's good in zone coverage. It's where he thrives. And we know the Colts like to run a lot of zone coverage as well. One thing that the Colts like in their corners is guys that are willing tacklers, and he's certainly a guy that'll help in the run support department. He has the toughness to do it. Overall, I like him a lot. I think he has a good high ceiling for a corner. And I don't know, honestly, if he's going to make it out of the first round. But if he's sitting there at 34 and the Colts feel like he's the best player on their board and they don't want to trade down, I could see him fitting right in with his defense and what they want to do, especially with the concerns around some of the corners that the Colts have right now, especially Xavier Rhodes, a guy who has had a couple forgettable seasons the last 2 years. So I like him a lot here, potentially as a 34 guy, and just adding more to that defense. I mean, the Colts have put a huge emphasis on that defense and adding and bringing in guys that'll help them presumably. And I think Jaylen Johnson could just be more of them doubling down on that. Mm-hmm. And the next guy we have here is Brice Hall. He's a little bit taller. He's an inch taller, 6'1", a little bit heavier, 202, 32 and at 0.25 inch arms, 9.63 hand size. He ran a 4.53 40. He's probably a guy that's going to go 3rd to 4th round. In 2020, he had 20 tackles, 4 passes broken up. And unfortunately, he didn't complete the 2019 season. He got injured. But he is a big, tall, physical corner. But he may have some limitations in the NFL. That would be a knock on him. He struggled a little bit with some of those quicker type of wide receivers, especially you look back on the Florida State wide receiver, Tamorrion Terry. And also with the bigger wideouts as well, with Terry, for example, generating some separation coming out of the breaks. So another knock could be with that. Sometimes he can be a little bit stiff-hipped a little bit, and he's not as twitchy. He's probably better and a better fit for a press man scheme. And he could play some in the zone scheme. But so another concern would be for Hall would be his speed and athleticism, especially matching up against the best athletes in the world in the NFL. So I'd probably have him more of a 3rd round guy if the Colts were looking there, if they feel like he's the best player on their board. I could see him 3rd or 4th round type of guy. Derek, what do you think about Brice Hall?
Yeah, when you look at Brice Hall, he's kind of the same thing as what we're defining as Xavier Rhodes right now. Very taller, stronger kind of corner that does really well up at the line. Very aggressive, can play, like you said, play that press scheme because he's just so much more physical and he's a little bit bigger. But yeah, I mean, that's the issue is you get these wide receivers that are very agile and very good with their moves, even at 5 yards. That could be very stressful for a guy like Brice Hall. He's going to have to get better with his footwork ultimately. That's ultimately why he's going to probably end up in the 3rd round somewhere, because got the size and he's got the intangibles. He's just got to get better with his flexibility and just the way he plays. All right, now we're going to move on to another corner, Reggie Robinson. Pretty much relatively the same size as Brice Hall, but his hands are a lot smaller. 6'1", 202. 32.5-inch arms, 8.5-inch hands. 40 time was a 4.44. So ran a good 40 time, projected in the third or fourth round. Robinson in 2019, he had 13 passes broken up and 38 tackles and had 4 interceptions. There's a lot of people that say he could potentially get drafted higher than expected because a tall corner with speed and athleticism that certainly helps you in a lot of respects. And then when you have the numbers to back that up, like the stats I mentioned earlier, I mean, that's crazy. I mean, over the past 3 seasons, he's had a total of 21 passes broken up. So he definitely has an instinct on how to make sure that the receiver doesn't get the ball. Robinson's got a good skill set, could develop into an outside corner at some point soon. Definitely a sleeper pick for me, because when you're looking at 6'1", 200 pounds, 32.5-inch arms, runs a 4.5 or a sub-par 4.5. I mean, that's incredible. And when you look at the way he's able to get these numbers of passes broken up, definitely has good ball skills. I would certainly not mind a third or fourth round chance on Reggie Robinson. What about you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. The Colts need some physicality in their corners, especially bringing in Xavier Rhodes, more of a physical corner. But, bringing in a guy like Robinson out of Tulsa, he's a guy that I think the things that he needs to work on are all teachable and coachable things. You look at his footwork that he needs to continue to develop. It can be sloppy at times, but he's a terrific athlete. He really is. He's a terrific athlete. He's a guy that, he's big, so he can jam receivers at the line, works really well and very aggressive in the press coverage. And he has some upside, I think, in the kind of scheme that the Colts run with that zone coverage. He's just a type of guy where, you talk about defenders, he's just kind of a dog on defense. He's the kind of guy that, he would bring that kind of mentality to this Colts secondary. Maybe it's something the Colts secondary needs. It's just an alpha dog type of personality in there. He's a guy that I think really his worst trait, if you will, is his technique. And so if he can continue to develop his technique, he has all the physical tools there to be a very good and physical corner, kind of a Ballard mold, longer arm type of corner that the Colts are looking for. So I like it here, especially if you can get him, nab him in the third or fourth round. Reggie Robinson for sure is a guy that I like. Okay, moving on now to our next guy, Troy Pride Jr. out of Notre Dame. I know Troy Pride pretty well. 5'11", 193, 30.63 arms, 9-inch hands, 4.40, 40 time. He's probably going to go third to fifth round if I would guess here. He had 40 tackles last year, 6 passes broken up, an interception during 2019. And he was solid. He was a solid player, I would say. He didn't overly impress me, though. As a senior, I think he helped himself, certainly. He had a pretty good combine, I would say. He had a very fast 40 time with a 4.40. And he was part of a pretty good Notre Dame secondary, especially in 2018. He combined with Julian Love to provide a really, really good coverage on the perimeter. He forced 10 passes broken up that year, 2 interceptions, a forced fumble, 37 tackles. He's got some decent size to him, and he's very fast. He had a strong senior year. I could see him potentially being a riser, maybe even going a little bit earlier than projected. What do you think, Derek, about Troy Pride?
Yeah, 5'11", 193. That's okay size for me. If we're going to talk about, Jaylen Johnson being somewhat small, we kind of have to be consistent with Troy. Not saying that Troy is small, but, he is an inch shorter and he's the same weight. I just think they say he's a little bit bulkier, so that kind of explains why. Hand size, arm size, decent but not great. Again, that 40 time at a 4.4 is really good. I think outside of everything is when you talk to Troy Pride and you listen to him speak, he is just a very intelligent and heartfelt individual. And that just speaks volume to me as a Colts fan and as a Chris Ballard believer. I think that's what Ballard looks at just as much as anything. Troy could be a guy that, falls later in the draft and just, his character alone and the way he pushes himself certainly plays into the favor of the Colts. So I wouldn't mind it if we're getting him in the 4th round. All right, next one, Lamar Jackson out of Nebraska. We have 6'2", 205 pounds, 32 and a quarter arms, 9.63 inch hands, 40 time of a 4.58, projected to be around the 4th or 5th round. We have Jackson totaled 40 tackles last season with 3 interceptions, 1 sack, 2 forced fumbles, and 12 passes defended as a senior. So he was a very versatile and very complimentable corner for sure. In 2018, he had 28 stops with 2 picks and 7 breakups. So he's a good sized corner and a decent athlete, but they actually said he's pretty soft against the run. I guess you can kind of say that with 40 tackles. And I mean, ultimately, it's weird to think that he's not really a big playmaker in coverage because, you hear the 28 tackles, and then you think 3 interceptions, 12 passes defended, but I think necessarily that doesn't mean that much to him. Many consider him to be a soft defender, which is quite honestly weird, but he's more of a press man corner, which, is a lot like a Richard Sherman kind of style right there, just with his size and just the way he's able to manipulate people up front. So Lamar Jackson, I think definitely could be, and not the quarterback, the cornerback. I think could be an interesting prospect. 4.58 is not a great 40 time, but it's certainly not terrible. Again, you're just getting another big guy that, can make plays within those first 10 yards and then afterwards just has issues. What are you thinking on this one, Cody?
You mentioned he's a tall guy. I think he has, the kind of the traits that Ballard's looking for, 6'2", over 200 pounds. I think he has good athleticism. He's got really good length as a result. And you mentioned he's a little bit soft. I also think he's a willing tackler, which I think is important. He's going to try to tackle. And I think because of the length that he has, it gives him the ability to wrap up on the perimeter. He's a guy that I like a lot, especially in the later rounds, mid to later rounds. An outside corner who has flexibility. He can move inside in some different packages. But overall, I like him, especially, we mentioned out of Nebraska. Nebraska didn't have a great defense last year. I feel like they haven't had a great defense in a long time. But he's a guy that I look at as kind of he doesn't have to start right away. He can kind of come in maybe like a Marvell Tell, kind of those physical tools are there, but he has to continue to develop as a corner. But I like Lamar Jackson quite a lot. He's one of my favorite corner prospects later on in the draft. So I like him there in potentially, you mentioned maybe 4th to 6th round, maybe somewhere in there. I think if you get him 4th, 5th round, I think it's a guy with tremendous upside and tremendous physical tools. So I like that a lot. Okay, the next guy on our list, and I apologize, I'm probably going to mess up this last name. Derek, what is the last name? Oshamanda. Michael Oshamanda. 6 foot, 199, 32.13 inch arms, 9 inch hands, 40 time, 4.45, 4th to 6th round guy, similar to Lamar Jackson. He played for Iowa last year, and I thought he played pretty well in 2019. He had 52 tackles, 3 interceptions, and broke up 9 passes. He also had a really good combine, which I think will help him out in this draft. Bigger corner, similar to Jackson. He's not as tall or long as Jackson, but I think he's a guy that fits well into the zone or even the press man. He shows the ability to play with those techniques. He was pretty good as a junior as well. He had 3 interceptions, 39 tackles, 6 passes broken up. So he's played for 3 years, and I think he's a guy that could translate pretty well as well. He's not a small corner. He's 200 pounds, 6 foot. I like him potentially as a potential 4th to 6th round pick, like I said. Derek, are there any other things you want to add about this guy? I just know going to have somebody in the comments. If I was to mispronounce that was going to correct me.
Yeah,
so
it's fine.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the ultimate issue with his is inconsistency. He's a very aggressive corner. So he does like to take those chances. And when he gets left on an island, sometimes that can be his nemesis because he tries to make the big play versus just hovering on the receiver. So that's ultimately why he's so far down, because of the inconsistencies. But again, when you look at the intangibles, you can just change the way he plays, then or put him in a scheme that works best to his way of playing, then that certainly can be a good depth piece for you right away. All right. Another guy that I've been hearing a lot of, and I kind of enjoy this option when we're looking at a 5th round corner potentially, and that is Meek Robertson. Meek Robertson out of LA Tech. So 5'8", 187 pounds, 30.5-inch arms, 9-inch hands, 40 time of around a 4.5. So Robertson basically decided to skip his senior year after putting up really good numbers last season. He had 5 interceptions, 16 passes defended, and 60 tackles. It was really comparable to his sophomore year where he had 61 tackles, 4 interceptions, and 12 passes broken up. Robertson will basically have to compete as a slot corner. Obviously, you're talking about Kenny Moore in that sentence, which he has a lot of that Kenny Moore to me. A shorter guy. A lot of people kind of forget about him, but then when you just look at his numbers just pop off to you. I mean, good Lord, 60 tackles, 16 passes defended, and 5 interceptions last year. That's amazing for a guy that's 5'8". Meek Robertson shows really good ball skills, really a smart guy. Of course, they always say, it's never really a need when Kenny Moore might be one of the best actually the best at his position, along with 2 other guys on our team that are best at their positions, and Big Q and Darius Leonard. But I mean, you can never have a bad backup. It's never a bad idea to have a good backup there for you. And I mean, Meek Robertson definitely fills that role. I think he plays just like Kenny Moore, and I think Kenny Moore and him could definitely get along. I think it would be a really good tandem there. You never can have too many inside corners to help. So, Cody, what are your thoughts on Meek?
Yeah. Before I get to Ameet, talking about Kenny Moore, we saw last year when Kenny Moore went down, got injured a few times, Colts had nobody to replace him. Nobody replaced him and played well, and they got killed in the slot so much when Kenny Moore wasn't in there, and it was such a huge, huge drop-off. And so I like this guy simply because you can get him later. He's a guy that can play the slot. He's a guy that can play a little bit of nickel for you. He's the type of guy that also, for his size, is a physical guy. He's really good at run defense, which will help you a lot, especially for a guy that's willing to go up and make a tackle. I know they signed TJ Carey to a 1-year deal, but, Meek Robinson could be a guy who, maybe is, competing for a roster spot. And then next year when Carey's not on the team anymore, he's the guy that's your backup slot corner for Kenny Moore. 5'9", 172. It's incredible. Like, looking at when you mentioned how many passes he broke up, I was like, this guy's 5'9". How did he even do that? But he's similar to Kenny Moore. He's a guy that plays bigger than he is. He's a guy that, for the lack of size he has, he's willing to match up against some of those guys. And maybe he won't always win, but he'll certainly is a guy that's going to kind of what I mentioned earlier with one of the corners. He's a guy that's going to bring kind of that mentality of he's going to be kind of a dog in that secondary. I'm going to be a guy that's consistently being competitive, consistently doing what he's asked to do, and he's also going to be a good slot guy for you. So Kenny Moore needs a breather. Kenny Moore gets injured. He's the guy that can step in and help you in the slot. So I like this guy a lot as kind of a late round guy that could project into a really nice slot corner for you and a really nice backup for Kenny Moore for a lot of years.
Absolutely. And we got one more guy here, and it was actually a corner that I mentioned on my mock draft 2.0, and I liked him just because of the way he played in college, and that is Harrison Hand from Temple. So another guy from Rocky Ascend's alumni there. He plays a lot of different schemes in college. He's 6 foot, near 200 pounds, but he played a lot of zone in Temple, which is, again, another thing that you talk about. He's a risk taker. He definitely is very good at, making plays in those zone packages. He just doesn't have that top end speed to keep up with most wide receivers. But again, when you're looking at a zone corner, Harrison Hand definitely appeals to me with, being 6 foot, 200 pounds, good sized corner there. What did you think, Cody? I know you kind of talked about it when we talked about my mock draft 2.0, but do you have any other ones with him?
Yeah, he's a guy that you mentioned. He thrives in the zone coverage, which translates super well into what the Colts want to do with their secondary and with their scheme. I like him just because he has some good ball skills. Like you mentioned, he takes risks, so he's kind of a boomer bust type of player. But sometimes that works to your advantage. Sometimes it's a guy who you just need one turnover, and that could be the deciding factor between a win and a loss. And so he's a guy that's actually, for as big of a corner as he is, I think he has some good flexibility and some good bend to his game. He's also got good hip level, which I think is important, especially just considering how he's a bigger type of corner. Yeah, he's a guy that I think has, he has pretty good football IQ too, which is huge. He's a tough guy, which, Temple tough, they always talk about. He's one of those Temple tough guys. He's a guy that'll come up and tackle. Just needs to get a little bit more disciplined in some of his aspects of his game. He mentioned the coverage and also just some of the tackling as well. But overall, I like him. He's a physical corner. I think he's a guy, that I would certainly like to see potentially as a later round guy, see how the Colts can develop him. Then the obvious connection with Rocky Ascend. But no, I like him overall. I think he's a guy, Harrison Hand here out of Temple, that I would like potentially as a later round cornerback. So that's my take there on Harrison Hand.
All right, awesome. Well, hey guys, that's going to do it for the cornerback group there. We went through about 8 of them. So hopefully you guys enjoyed those. Hopefully there's a few names there. I know Ameet and Jaylen Johnson were definitely a few names there, but let us know if any of these other guys truly pique your interest, and let us know of some other guys that you think could be in there. Just a few more days now until this draft. By the time we get this uploaded, it'll probably be Wednesday, so it'll be one day until then. So make sure everybody is being prepared for it. So thank you guys again so much for the support, and as always, go Colts.